Welcome to Delaware Healthcare Reality, a podcast presentation of the Medical Society of Delaware with Dr. Nicholas Biasotto. Dr. Biasotto is board certified in family medicine, and he has extensive experience and training in treating patients with addiction and substance abuse. Now, let's join Dr. Nick Biasotto for Delaware Healthcare Reality.
Hello, I'm Nick Biasotto. I'm the host of the Medical Society of Delaware's podcast, Delaware Healthcare Reality. Today we are going to talk with Dr. Carol Tavani. She is a renowned neuropsychiatrist practicing in Delaware. She received her MD degree from Jefferson College. And per the Delaware Today magazine, quote, she's armed with an arsenal of modern drugs. She is one of a new breed of psychiatrists who takes a medical approach to mental disorders. She is a life trustee of Christiana Care Health System and is a past president of the Medical Society of Delaware. In 2004, she was elected as president of the AMA's Organization of State Medical Association Presidents. She is a board-certified neuropsychiatrist and a diplomat of the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology. She is also a respected forensic consultant and an expert witness. Lastly, she is an animal rights activist who cares deeply for animals' rights and health. Welcome, Dr. Tavani. I have frequently consulted you myself for people in my practice who are a challenge, and I need your advice, and it's always been there, and you've been very helpful. But here we are. 'Tis the season, but not everybody is jolly. What do you think about that? How does this occur in your mind, and what do you think we can do about it? Or people that have the problem can do about it?
Well, it is definitely a problem, and thank you, Nick, for having me here today. It's
You're
a pleasure to be here with you. Holidays are thought of as joyous times, exciting times, full of events, but unfortunately, for an awful lot of people, it's not so jolly. Many people, I think, experience the holidays as an evaluative time. They kind of take stock of how their life is, maybe how they wish it would be and how it isn't. A lot of times there's a focus on loss. Maybe you've had a bad loss or series of losses. It could be a family member, a pet who is a family member, various things. But life just isn't kind of the way you would like it to be at this time of year, and so it's a little hard to be celebratory. So that makes holidays a little hard for people. Loneliness is an epidemic, especially in this country, where people get so separated. You know, it's not the multi-generational family it used to be. And a lot of people are alone during the holidays or have a relative dearth of support. So it's not really jolly for a lot of people.
Right.
I think superimposed on this is also the fact that winter blues are setting in right now. And we can talk a little bit about that too.
It seems like in my earlier days and your earlier days, family units were closer. Nowadays, it seems like people and kids and family members all separate and go distances across the country to pursue their professions, and families are so far separated that it's so difficult to be as close as we used to be when we were younger. You did mention a very important factor here, and that's the season.
Yes.
And we talked earlier before we started this conversation about, seasonal affective disorder, or when the light changes and we don't have enough of it, and what happens then? What happens to the brain during the season when the light has gone away?
Well, people really suffer when the days start to get shorter. There's a photo period that's much shorter, and I think it affects us for a number of reasons. One is a very biologic reason, and that is we need sunlight. We make vitamin D by just being exposed to sunlight. But the other thing is that we lose daylight saving time, and both on a biological basis and on a psychosocial basis, this is really hard for people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's been a movement to make daylight saving time all year round, and there was even a bill in the legislature. It's called the Sunshine Protection Act. I'd like to put in a plug here for everybody to contact their Congress people, because it's going to come up again to make daylight saving time all year round. You know, they did that in World War I to conserve energy.
Correct.
So we're so energy conscious now. It seems to be a no-brainer. And did you know that even Benjamin Franklin advocated being on that kind of a schedule to preserve candles? So this goes way, way back.
It sure does, yeah.
Yeah, and some people actually would like it to be the other way, to make Eastern Standard Time the norm. Even the APA came out in favor of that, but it's crazy, in my opinion, because the argument, if you listen to the argument, it's really the change that they're protesting against. The better way would be daylight saving time all year round. And it's not just biologic. Think about this. There are so many things that you can't do when it gets dark outside. You can't take a nice long walk with your dog. You can't take your dog to a dog park at 6 o'clock at night like you would after work normally and socialize with other people. If you're a gardener, you can't be out there digging away in the garden if it's pitch black out there. There's so many things that restrict your activities, your ability to exercise, which is very antidepressant. There's so many things you can't do after it gets dark out.
But what does the light do biologically to your brain and its brain chemistry?
Biologically, it makes you make serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter which governs mood. Serotonin turns into melatonin, which helps you sleep at night when it gets dark. If you don't get light, you don't make that yourself. You also aren't exposed to sunlight, so you're not making vitamin D. It's critical to have enough vitamin D.
Correct.
We used to think it was just for bones.
And that's immune system.
But it's your immune system, it's for mood, and it's cognition as well. Just as an aside, next time you get labs from your doctor, because everybody doesn't check it. I check it on everybody.
I do too.
Good for you.
I do.
Because the lab values are a little bit behind the times. The lab value will say, well, below 29 is deficient. That's wrong. That's outdated. You want that number up around 60. Just FYI.
Good.
It's good to know. And people should know that.
Well, how are the people in the Arctic regions in which they have 6 months of light and 6 months of darkness? How do they cope?
Increased incidence of suicides.
Really?
Yes. And the closer you are to the tropics or to the equator, the less incidence of seasonal problems.
Really?
Yeah, the people in the Northeast and the Midwest have more winter blues and seasonal affective disorder than people who are farther south. Interesting.
Interesting is correct. Okay, now we know that that's a problem. We would like to solve it by making daylight savings time all year round. That would be a wonderful thing, I think. But what do we do about the people who are saddened by all of this and seem to not be able to get out of a rut? You mentioned, yes, there's maybe loneliness. Maybe there was a loss in the family of a person or an animal, which is like a family member. But there are other reasons that must cause them to feel this way other than the light. And how do you deal with it when you get this way so that maybe you can be a little bit jolly?
Sure. Well, the symptoms of both winter blues or seasonal affective disorder in its more severe form would include things like sleeping too much, fatigue, you don't feel like socializing. Also, what happens with many, many people is a craving for carbs, for sweets. And so the more you eat of that, the worse it affects your mood. It's a vicious cycle.
And then you gain weight and you don't feel good about that.
Exactly. Then you feel, you get wampo. You feel bad about yourself. So some of the things you can do are the following. Increase your daylight as much as you can. A huge thing you can do that's easy and safe, get yourself a light box. I am a huge proponent of light boxes. They have to be 10,000 lux, L-U-X, that's the unit of light. And you just have to be in front of it somewhere a couple of hours a day, not right on top of it, but right just in your line of view, not too close to bedtime because it's energizing. But it makes a big difference. It's one of the first things you do for winter blues.
I recommend that too, but I always have a problem with recommending a brand because they always say, is there a brand? I tell them it's in the range of 10,000 or greater lux, but is there a brand that you know that's better than others? Is it white light? Is it blue light?
It's full spectrum light.
Full spectrum light.
It's full spectrum light.
Okay.
Sort of like the grow lights that you put on your plants.
Got
It's
it.
full spectrum light.
Got it.
A couple that I know of are Northern Lights and Sunbox, but so many companies make them now that as long as it's 10,000 lux and you sit and you use it, I tend to use mine when I can sort of feel the days getting shorter. You know, I come out of work and it's dark. You know, I think, oh darn, you know, I can't go plant something or, you know, be outside and play. So that's one thing that it's easy to do. It's very little in the way of side effects. It's not a drug.
Right.
You don't want to be in front of it too much, or if it's causing eye strain, you know, maybe turn it down a little bit, but you got to get that 10,000 lux.
Okay. Got it.
That's one thing. Another thing is that when you get winter blues, you don't feel like doing things. You got to make yourself a little bit. Structure things in. You know, if you make a date to do something, you sort of have to do it. So structure some social activities. Build it in to your schedule. The other thing is diet. You are what you eat. So cut the carbs. You know, if you feel like having something sweet, go for fruit. The more you can go toward a Mediterranean diet, plant-based diet, the better it is for mood, as well as even reversing diabetes.
Correct.
So many advantages to going more plant-based. When you go plant-based, you have to take your vitamins, though, so just remember that.
Yeah, we've talked about that in our obesity podcast.
Yeah. The other thing is vitamin D.
Yes.
Make sure, I mean, it's vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. In theory, you could get too much of it, but too much would be like a carload. So it's not going to hurt anybody to take 1,000 units of vitamin D, but have your doctor check your level.
Right.
And you want that number up around 60. It's not 29, which the lab will tell you.
Gotcha.
Okay, the lab is outdated.
I check my patients for vitamin D.
Always.
And it says 30 or less is not good, but 30 and above is okay. But I tell them I usually tell them take 2,000 units I use a day.
You want it up around 60.
And that's what I do.
Yeah,
I take about
absolutely. So make sure you get that vitamin D. You make a little of it, you know, with daylight, but we don't have daylight. You know, that's moot.
Right. It activates it if you're in the sun, so it activates what you take in.
Did you know that 50% of people in this country are deficient in vitamin D? It's a big number.
Maybe that's why we have a lot of mental illness in this country.
So it's part of it. So that the vitamin D, but you want to structure socializing, diet. You want to get some exercise. It's hard when it gets dark out because you can't go outdoors and get exercise. But however you can get it, you know, just a brief walk, even a few times a week. Some office buildings and even indoor facilities have long corridors. At Christiana Hospital, we actually have a walking trail. I mean, I walk from my office to the ICU several times a day. I get at least a mile in a day like that, and try to make it brisk, as brisk as you can. So diet, exercise, socialization. Find things that you like to do, that you enjoy doing. Another good thing that's sort of a gentle but easy thing to do is yoga. And another thing that helps mood is meditation. Mindful meditation is very helpful.
Good time to get under your light. Maybe do a stationary bike while you're under it. And maybe meditate a little bit while you're at it.
Well, that's a trifecta.
There you go. That'll make me smile all day, I guess.
But there are things you can do to combat it. And plan things. If you have something planned that you're looking forward to, that helps a lot.
Darn right it does. Darn right it does.
So those are 5 or 6 things that we can do to make it better.
Gotcha.
Tanning booths are another whole ball of wax because in a tanning booth, you're exposed to harmful
Right.
wavelengths of light, which are carcinogenic and which will give you skin cancer like melanoma or squamous or basal cell carcinomas will be exacerbated by something like a tanning booth. So that's not the best way to do it.
Yeah, there's ultraviolet lights that may be harmful to you in that tanning booth.
Exactly.
Okay, now maybe a little bit off of the holiday blues.
Sure.
Just mental health in this country in general, in my opinion, is lacking. Mental health care is lacking tremendously in this country. We have people living on the street, living in their cars, people with paranoid schizophrenia. As a matter of fact, one just busted all the windows in our office down the way because he was a disgruntled patient with one of the doctors in the building. And he lives in a car, doesn't take his meds. How do we get control of this? And do we need more places to put people that are dangerous to those who aren't a problem? What's your feel on that?
It's a very difficult question to answer.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the degree to which we see this nowadays is largely due to something called deinstitutionalization.
Mm-hmm.
Once upon a time, there were many, many more people in psychiatric hospitals who basically lived there because they were chronically mentally ill. Now, it might not have been done in the best way back in the day, but people got the idea, especially when we started to have medications.
Thorazine.
In 1953.
That's when the Kennedy era was, and he was saying
that could treat.
Right.
And actually, that did enable some people to have a life again.
Correct.
And to live outside the hospital. But it went too far. The idea was that we would have community facilities for these people to live in when we let them out of the hospital. Unfortunately, we let them out of the hospital and the community facilities weren't there to catch them. So this gave rise to a huge homeless population. When I came to Wilmington as an intern, there was one bag lady. We all knew her. She lived at the train station.
Yeah, you're right.
Now, people are sleeping on grates. There are tent cities. It's a mess.
How do we get a hold of this? What do we do? I know we need legislation, but the cost of maybe building the facilities, housing managing the facilities, and then giving them a community where they can go regularly for their medications and keep cool, calm, and collected would cost a fortune, no?
Well, the argument was that it costs more to have them as inpatients than outpatients, but that's not the case if you do it right. Because this revolving door that we have of they go in the hospital, you get them better, you let them out, they don't take their medicine, they come back in. This revolving door is much more expensive than having proper treatment and facilities to begin with. In an ideal world, yes, there would be maybe group homes or better facilities. We don't have that right now. I do think that to a degree, more people belong in a long-term facility than there are now. It's certainly better than having them endanger themselves and others on the street. I mean, most schizophrenics really aren't violent. They're more often the victims of crime than the perpetrators. However, if somebody's paranoid and off their meds and they think you're attacking them, they're going to, quote, defend themselves. And this happens a lot. So I think that we need more access to mental health treatment. There's a tremendous shortage of psychiatrists
Tell me about
right now. But we need more and better access and more intensive treatment. And in the long run, that will save money. But I also think that there is a place for some more inpatient beds. There's a wonderful article, if anybody wants to read it. It was out of University of Pennsylvania a few years ago, and it's called, quote, Bring Back the Asylum, quote. And the idea is that we do need more long-term facilities, but done in a very different way than it used to be in the old days.
Yeah, that was horrible in the old days. It makes you
in a much more...
It wasn't run well.
Right.
I think a major part of our crime industry in this country, a crime industry, I call it as an industry, it's like an industry. Our crime in this country is based on those who are mentally ill in many cases.
Mentally ill and substance abuse.
Exactly.
And don't forget that a lot of people self-treat
Correct.
their mental illness with drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Almost all substance abuse is a self-medication of something.
Correct.
Whether people realize it or admit it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And then, when you have a mentally ill person on drugs, boy, is that a double whammy. I've had a lot of forensic cases that are, in some cases murders,
Mm-hmm.
et cetera,
Mm-hmm.
assaults, violent cases that I've had that were on drugs because they were self-medicating.
Well, you want to feel better, and sometimes these drugs do make you feel better.
Sometimes.
I mean, they're now looking into hallucinogens as possibly a treatment for refractive
Ketamine
depression.
and other things, yeah.
I mean, so I guess they make them feel better transiently, but then to get the drug is a crime, and to get the money to buy the drugs is another crime when they could go to their psychiatrist or their primary care doctor and get a medication that is not a crime to have and is as effective as some of these other drugs that are out there. How do we make this happen, though? This is so frustrating. Do we talk to our congressmen, our senators, and tell them, look, we need this. This has to be done. The AMA should be a big proponent for this, are they not?
Possibly not aggressively enough.
Agreed. Mm-hmm.
I think that the medical organizations in general, not to talk out of school because I'm part of those, I've been in the leadership of
I am
just
too.
about all of them, as you have.
Mm-hmm.
I think that doctors in general tend to be reactive. I think we need to be more proactive
Agreed.
in general and do a lot of preemptive strikes in that regard.
I fully agree. And I think that with enough demand of our leadership, we can get these things done. But where do we start? How do we begin? How do we get a force strong enough to overcome whatever the barriers are to improving the situation? All right, I think it's time for a little break, and we'll answer this question when we get back from the break.
Information about the Medical Society of Delaware can be found on our website, medicalsocietyofdelaware.org. Questions about our podcast can be emailed to healthcare.reality@medsocdel.org. That's medsocdel.org. Once again, here's Dr. Nick Biasotto.
Okay, we're back from our break now. This is Dr. Nick Biasotto having a conversation with Dr. Carol Tavani. That question I asked before the break basically is, what do we do to get our leadership in this country to get it together on this mental health issue and give us the money and the resources we need to help the mentally ill move on?
I think a lot of it is just awareness of the problem. I think that mental health has been kind of a second-class citizen.
Always.
Not as important, say, as cardiovascular disease or cancer. But in many ways, it's more far-reaching. If people are mentally ill, they don't even get the medical care that they need for other diseases. The other thing is destigmatization. That mental health, mental illness has a stigma about it. We need to destigmatize it. It's an illness like diabetes or thyroid problems.
It's all chemical.
Anything else. It's all biological.
You know that as a neuropsychiatrist.
That's the whole reason I started the consultation service at Christiana Hospital. It's to meld internal medicine with psychiatry, which is what I do in the critical care units there.
Okay.
But I think we need to destigmatize it. We need to make people more aware of it. And I think then the funding will start to flow.
Okay. We are, I think, more sympathetic today towards mental illness than we used to be. Families even realize that, they know it's a chemical issue. And sometimes by just tweaking the chemicals, you may make people feel a lot better. And your idea, or that book, Bring Back Asylums.
Bring Back the Asylum. It's an article.
It's an article,
Yeah,
okay.
you can Google it in the literature. It came out of University of Pennsylvania, actually.
Okay. Institutionalization. You mentioned earlier, you said that we have ways to get them in the hospital, treat them, get them on the right meds, get them cool, get them ready to go back into society. But can they go out into society, normal society, or do we need special places for them?
Well, one of the things that's happened is that when people go inpatient, sometimes it's so short stay that it doesn't really solve the problem. They'll get them to the point where maybe they're not actively suicidal, but they're not really good yet. I think we need more of a transition. I think we need possibly for many people longer inpatient or at least intensive outpatient stays. And we need more facilities that are more intensive than we have now. The shortage of mental health care is just terrible.
Well, here in our little state of Delaware, we should have some more influence on our legislators to maybe make them build facilities for these people and see if we can be a model for the rest of the country. I mean, in Delaware, being little, everybody knows everybody, and we know how to do things. We could maybe be a way to start this if we ever could get around to getting our legislative members to realize this.
I think that's a point well taken. The other thing I wanted to point out that happened when we let people out of the hospitals is that mentally ill people do bizarro things that run afoul of the law. So what happens is they get locked up, they get incarcerated, and actually they get punished for being really mentally ill, although they may have done something awful too. But oftentimes in the prisons, they get less than no help at all, or it may be substandard, or it may not be recognized, or it may take forever to even see the mental health person there. They may not have all the better medications for people. So the prisons have become repositories for the mentally ill. By some statistics, 85% of people incarcerated have a substance abuse problem, and a huge percentage of those are mentally ill. So this is another problem that's derived from having deinstitutionalized, and we need to do something about that too.
Got it. That sounds like a plan. Maybe we ought to start something going there, Carol. What do you think?
I'm with you.
Let's go rolling down to Dover and start a little bit of a conversation with the people down there. I feel as though we can stop a large portion of some of the crimes in this country and some of the things that are going on in this country if we can get good control of our mentally ill.
Definitely.
Look at the recent situation on the New York subway with Penny, who had to restrain a man who was violent and potentially dangerous for those people on the train. Thank God he got acquitted, in my opinion.
Thank God the jury got it right.
I think they got it right. The guy was really a hero in my mind. I think he protected the people on that train.
I agree.
And he should be lauded for it.
But you know what that has done, though? The prosecutors have created a situation where the Good Samaritans are going to be afraid to come
do something.
forth because they'll get charged.
Agreed. That's a shame. That's a real shame. Well, I learned a lot here today. You got any more good things you can bring out and tell me?
Glad. Ask me and I'll try to answer.
How's your business going? How's your practice? How busy is it?
It's too much of a good thing. But I'm very blessed. I love everything I do.
I remember the first time I met you, Carol, I was probably 3 years out in practice, and you were giving a lecture at St. Francis.
Oh.
And it was on schizophrenia.
No kidding.
You had an audience that was like you were a rock star. And I said, who is this person? Well, I found out as time went on, and it's been really good working with you, both in your profession and our profession, and also working with you as ex-presidents of the Medical Society.
Oh, likewise. You've always been one of the good guys.
I like it. I love doing this. It's fun. And it says something, and it tells people how ways we can help. I think I've hit the topic pretty well with you, and if there's anything else you want to add, just feel free.
I think we've covered a lot of ground. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you again.
Okay, very good. This is Dr. Nick Biasotto with an interesting conversation we just had with Dr. Carol Tavani. We will have her back later when we win the war against mental illness, and she could probably be our captain and lead the way. Again, this is our 14th podcast, and there will be more coming. Have a good one.
This has been Delaware Healthcare Reality, a podcast presentation of the Medical Society of Delaware. For more information about MSD, visit our website, medicalsocietyofdelaware.org. For questions or suggestions regarding our podcast, email us at healthcare.reality@medsocdel.org. Thanks to audionautics.com for our music. Delaware Healthcare Reality is produced by Tom Mitton. I'm Lori Ann Rhodes. Watch for our next podcast episode. Until then, be well. The Medical Society of Delaware, MSD, is providing this podcast for informational purposes only. It provides neither medical, legal, nor any other professional advice. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by the host or any guests are their own and do not reflect the views or policies of MSD. Unless specifically stated, reference to any specific product, service, or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by MSD. Reliance on the information provided in this podcast is exclusively at the risk of the listener. MSD expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or reliance on this podcast or the information presented in this podcast.